Right, at this point, you should have wrapped up the whole film, Saving Private Ryan. I hope you guys really like it and it kept you engaged and coming back for more. Definitely, well, I've heard it said before that movies in general kind of fall into two categories, like comedies and tragedies. It's a tragedy if pretty much everybody in the movie is dead by the end of it, which is the case for Saving Private Ryan. So it's definitely a heavy, deep movie that can kind of like I've had students break down in tears before and get pretty emotional about it. Now, remember, this group of guys, all of the people you get to know in this one are fictionalized. There was no real Captain Miller or Private Ryan. However, stories like this played out over and over and over again. And there is a ton of real life Captain Millers and Private Ryans and the rest of them that did sacrifice and ultimately lose their lives or lose a lot of their close friends and buddies in this war. Even though it's kind of maybe a sad movie and a downer at the end that so many of these guys didn't make it, I also at the same time think that there's something beautiful about it that just watching these guys and how they interacted with each other, which I think that's in a very accurate historical context from everything that I've read, the stories I've heard, even my grandpa's stories. That man, these guys really sacrificed a lot. The men and women that are fighting in this war and waging the war against Nazi Germany and Japan, their generation has often been called or gotten the nickname the greatest generation. And I think that's an earned title for them because think about it, these people, they grew up through the Great Depression. A lot of these people were hungry as kids and like they were very, very poor and a lot of economic uncertainty. And then as they're young adults, they end up having this huge conflict that they're going to have to go off and fight abroad and sacrifice so much to try to make the world safe for democracy and try to defeat fascism and these evil powers. So, anyway, that's my 2 cents on it. That even though this is a fictionalized movie, I absolutely love it because man, it's in such an accurate historical context, and it covers such a really interesting part of history, and I think pays honor to the greatest generation. A lot of these guys that had sacrificed so much to make our world better down the road. Uh, Let me think here. What you saw now, a few of the details in the movie today. When the Germans roll in first, you probably noticed that they had 4 tanks with them. The smaller tanks, where it was like there was no top rotating turret, those were Panzer tanks, the tanks that Germany had come out with very early on in the war. So that's the older version. The bigger tanks, where they had like kind of more of a modern looking tank with the top swiveling turret, those were called Tiger tanks, which were, even though they were very expensive, arguably might have been the best tank all around for any side during World War II. German engineering was very, very good, and they had a lot of excellent, outstanding equipment. Then at the end, you saw, one thing that definitely trumps tanks on the battlefield is airplanes. Air power is so crucial. And by this point in the war, 1944, most of the planes in the skies over Europe are Allied planes. We've beaten up the German Luftwaffe or the German Air Force pretty bad. Like the movie Memphis Belle, that was taking place in 1943 and very early in 44. By the time of the D-Day invasion, our Air Force is dominating the skies, and having P-51 Mustangs that they were bomber escorts and would protect our bomber planes on one hand, but they were also equally important as being supporting our ground troops and coming in and dive bombing tanks or enemy strongholds. So, that was a P-51 Mustang flying in there that took that German Tiger tank out right at the end of the movie before it was getting close to the bridge. So you see it, like all of that was pretty darn accurate. The guns they're using, kind of the combat and techniques, pretty darn accurate for how it would have looked at this stage of the war. Last up, the final scene there, hopefully that brought it all full circle. I know a lot of times when kids start the movie and they see that old guy walking through the cemetery at Colville, kind of along the English Channel, that really confuses people, and then it just skips back in time to the morning of June 6th, 1944. But then hopefully it makes sense to you. At the end of the movie, it goes back to that scene in the cemetery, and that's supposed to be, of course, Private Ryan many decades later going back there with his family and kind of honoring all of those guys that had sacrificed so much to keep him safe and help him survive the war. So anyway, in many ways, I think it's a pretty beautiful movie that's awesome, and it shows you a really interesting part of history. So I hope you guys like this movie even half as much as I like it. I've got some other good scenes that we're going to be tying in as we wrap up World War II. We're kind of bringing this whole unit to a close in the very near future. But anyway, this was the one feature film that I was showing for the unit. So if you really do like Saving Private Ryan, if you are a history buff and into World War II, and you're looking for more movies that are on, kind of similar to Saving Private Ryan or the same caliber of film, by all means, hit me up. I have a lot of different other recommendations, and I've seen tons of World War II movies. Some are not that great, and I would tell you don't mess with them, but I could give you advice and point you in the right direction if you really like this film and wanted other stuff that was similar to it. There's no shortage of quality movies about World War II. So, and if you're not into the war movies, well, hey, we're almost past the war stuff and moving on to some other things in the near future. All right, that's what I got for you today. Hopefully, you enjoyed this whole movie and unit and what we had going on. And I'll be back tomorrow with some new material for you. Take care.